at the Bend.
Yeah.
I've got a hotel room tonight in Hammond.
Yeah, that's more than halfway. But still, if you can get there, have a good meal, get that belly full, and be asleep by 6.
I don't even have to black out the curtain because it'll be dark
by then.
Yeah. Why are you only going halfway?
Because it's halfway. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, no. I like your plan right there. I'd do that in a heartbeat and go to sleep and sleep as absolutely long as you can sleep. You'd feel great after that.
Because then after the game,
a reminder pregame show
right back to that hotel room halfway back.
Yeah, but if you leave here at noon, you could get to New Orleans 5:36.
He's going to sell you on this.
Take that 2-3 hour nap.
Yeah.
You sleep in tomorrow. It's a night game.
Yeah. Brad is listening to us in Hattiesburg. He's got plenty of vitamins for us.
Yeah, that's right. Flintstones.
Yeah. Brad, let me give you a mailing address for maybe February.
That's been one of my stops on the way to New Orleans.
Huh?
I don't know if mailing it's a good idea.
You mail it to your neighbor and then you watch his mailbox.
I think they check for herbal vitamins these days.
I would tell you back in the day, if that ever happened, it would come from a person called Fat Elvis in Las Vegas. He's an entertainer at one of the piano bars, who, by the way, he's lost 200 pounds.
Fat Elvis has?
Yeah.
Well, his show's over then. What do you do after that?
He was 505.
He's down now?
Yeah.
He's down to 305.
I thought Fat Elvis was always my Peyton Manning reference when he came back to play for the
Well, it's for the Broncos. Fat Elvis winning the Super Bowl.
Really entertaining dude.
Fat Elvis is?
Yeah.
What's his shtick?
He sings Elvis music, dresses Elvis, and he's a little overweight.
Could have guessed that part, Jim. A lot of people do that. Like, what sets him apart? He's just fat?
Oh, he really sounds just like Elvis.
Does he really?
He sounds just like Elvis.
More so than the pastor up in Arkansas that people think is actually Elvis?
No, that guy talks like Elvis.
He
This guy
does. Looks like Elvis, talks like Elvis.
This guy sings like Elvis.
Yeah. You get a rabbit hole in that guy, or a wormhole. Is it a rabbit hole? Yeah. You get a rabbit hole in that old boy up in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Like, I know most of what you read is not true on the internet. I get it. But you start reading some stuff, and you're like, if 30% of this is true, like, I could believe that guy's Elvis. Like, I think Elvis is dead, but if you wanted to convince me, you'd start with that old boy in Arkansas.
Zach says he has received illegally mailed in out-of-state beers from different breweries for a long time if it's properly packed at USPS.
Oh, hey, look.
They don't care.
Yeah, I know plenty of people that get packages all the time.
Yeah. Good one, CU Buff says... how Fat Elvis lost 200 pounds. It was way to Welvis.
That's pretty good. I like that. I like it.
I like it, too. All right. We told you about New Life. Before we get to the Buffalo Wild Wings pick 3 here, Brownie, I need you to tell us about the great folks at Academy Sports, the new location. I've never gone to Academy Sports as much as I have lately. With this new location.
It's quite convenient for us, yes.
So convenient here on 280.
Yeah, Highway 280, right there in the Target Shopping Center. It's the old Best Buy, just off Highway 280 up behind Chick-fil-A. It's your new Academy Sports and Outdoors. It is open with the best in sports equipment, outdoor gear, apparel, and footwear from the brands you love, all at low everyday prices. Wide selection of trusted brands like Nike, Stanley, Brooks, Carhartt, Blackstone, Yeti, Titleist, Shimano, and more. It is Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, Buffalo Wild Wings pick 3. Go play it nextroundlive.com. Nextroundlive.com. It is brought to you by B-Dubs. There's the website. That's a live look. You're looking live at our website. You click there, and then you fill out the information. Forrester's got a couple of balls in the bucket. A lot of you have multiple balls in the bucket, more balls in the bucket, better chance to win the grand prize from our friends at Buffalo Wild Wings at the end of the year. He'll tell us, he being Lance, about Buffalo Wild Wings after we hear the song.
Pick 3, it's time for the pick 3. 3 for you and 3 for me, that equals a pick 3. Say goodbye to your family, it's time for the pick 3. Only time that I'm happy is when it's time for pick 3.
Hey, 11 Central Alabama locations, including the Buffalo Wild Wings Go location of Vestavia, #1 sports bar in Birmingham for over 20 years, wall-to-wall TVs, 26 sauces and seasonings, along with a full menu of great burgers, wraps, and salads. Stop in for college and NFL Sunday ticket all weekend long at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Josh in the MyBookie.ag chat room, I have no balls, or as Josh says it, I have no balls. Me either. I've been 2-1 some, 1-2 a lot. But I haven't gone 3-0 at all. I don't think you have either, Brown.
I don't think I was going to ask you if I have.
LT did last week. It's 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock Central Time, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. And I'm telling you, this race for Atlanta gets more and more interesting every week. But I don't even know if you want to be in Atlanta for the SEC championship. The race for the college football playoff gets crazy. Has the ACC become a one-bid league over the weekend? Is the Big 12 already a one-bid league? How many can the SEC get in? And did the Oregon Ducks become the first team ever to clinch a playoff spot with their win this weekend? We'll talk about all that with our man Tom Luginbill, who joins us now from his home after a weekend of travel. Lugs, man, we'll get to what Alabama did down in Baton Rouge in just a second. But the excitement of November games that matter, it was another magical weekend and a few twists on the way to the 12-team college football playoffs again.
Yeah, and I don't think we're done. Good morning, Jim. Happy Veterans Day. I think this is what you could come to expect every November, the moment we went to a 12-team playoff, because you talk about games that matter. Well, there's so many more games that matter now that involve teams that we would not have been talking about in years past, which is what makes each and every weekend must-see television. And listen, what I've learned, if I've learned one thing this fall, is that the margin of error is razor thin and nobody's safe. Nobody's safe, Jim.
Nobody is safe. And I will tell you, at the top, you had Oregon and Ohio State, no problem. But then 3 and 4 in the college football playoff rankings this past week, Georgia and Miami, both on the road, taking losses. Let's start first with Miami and what that means. Then we'll work into the SEC. Miami loses at Georgia Tech, 28-23. In this game, Tech runs the ball for 271 yards. They don't even pass for 100. Cam Ward was Cam Ward, but Miami, for some reason, continues to flirt with disaster, and finally disaster catches up with them in a loss here. What does this mean for Miami moving forward, in your opinion? Do they have to win the ACC championship? Because they had some close calls along the way that I think the committee may remember.
Well, listen, I think it's hard if, let's just say, because Pitt put themselves in a horrible position this past weekend, losing at home to Virginia. So let's remove them from the equation. Let's focus here on SMU in Miami, if you will.
Right.
Okay, and then we can throw Clemson in the discussion. You mentioned something that I think is very important right when we came on air, and that is, do you or do you not actually want to make your conference championship game? All right. And I'm curious to know if the committee will penalize a team. Let's just say a team goes into a conference championship game and they've got 2 losses, and there's 2 or 3 other teams in the conference that also have 2 losses but didn't make it. And that team goes to the championship game and they lose, and they have 3 losses. Are you going to drop them because they had to play another game against likely a ranked opponent while the other team sat at home? How are you going to view that? How are you going to gauge that? What type of weight are you going to place on that as a member of the committee? So if you took Miami and SMU, and let's just say both of them go in at 11-1, personally, I don't know how you could keep the loser out with a 2-loss loser in the championship game if you have other 2-loss teams, which could be the case in the conference that didn't play in the championship game. And I don't think this just applies to the ACC. They're just the perfect model right now. I think it's going to apply to a bunch of teams.
Yeah, now see, I sort of disagree with you here, and I know the situation we're in, that I'm an SEC guy, but regular season strength of schedule has to matter here. I don't think you get punished for playing in the SEC championship game, but I do think in the ACC and the Big 12 championship game, not that they're automatically a one-bid league, but if you go in there with a 1 loss and your strength of schedule is nowhere close to what other teams who are quote-unquote wild card teams, then I think you've got to win that. I think you can be punished for losing that situation, because all schedules are not equal, and all due respect, the path to the Big 12, the ACC, and for some teams in the Big 10 are different than what the top of the Big 10 and the SEC is having to play. Now, that may be biased in my opinion, but I think it's got to matter. If we're going to do this right, it's got to matter.
Yeah, I think it's got to matter, but I would actually throw the Big 10 in more with the ACC than I would the SEC.
I mean,
too. At the end of the day, SC's not any good. UCLA's not any good. Iowa's not any good. Rutgers, Maryland, Purdue's terrible. Northwestern, Illinois. I mean, we could go on. And that Michigan State, come on. I mean, that conference is, you can say what you want. I think the thing with the SEC that plays well with the committee, and I agree with it, is I think the environments are so different. They are just so different. And it does matter because it makes for it more difficult to come away with a big win on the road. And, where you're playing and not just who you're playing, but that environment does play a role. And I think that gives the SEC an edge. And I don't necessarily disagree with you either, Jim. What I was saying is I'm curious to see how the committee views it.
Yeah.
Right? Are they going to sit there and say, okay, Miami went down to a 4-loss team. I personally think if Haynes King doesn't get hurt at Georgia Tech, they are 8-2, 7-3, and they're not what they were. And you saw that on Saturday. They're a pretty good football team. I've seen them twice. So I'm fascinated by that and how that will play out. Now, listen, if you furthered this discussion and you're sitting there at the end of the season and there's 6 or 7 teams at 10-2 in the SEC, then you ask yourself the question, what do you do?
That's right. But into Atlanta, I just think there's an unwritten rule between the two big power players, the SEC and the Big Ten, with the committee. They've got all the power. I think somewhere along the way, wink and a nod, or maybe a nudge, an elbow, or maybe a threat. There's a
right.
Don't punish our championship game loser because it's too important.
Jim, take a look at Ole Miss, for example. Let's just say they don't make the championship game, okay? Or let's just say that they do make the championship game. Well, one of their losses is to Kentucky.
Yep.
Kentucky isn't any better than Georgia Tech.
That's right.
All right. So, again, all of these data points they're going to utilize and figure out how they play and the weight that they carry. I just think there's going to be a lot of teams looking at that conference championship game and maybe going, kind of glad we're not in it.
Dang it, we missed it. We missed it from the tiebreaker. Dang it, we don't get to go play for the conference championship. The show's brought to you by my friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag, mybookie.ag. Promo code next round, and you get a chance to play all the great college football action that continues tomorrow night. You get to play the NFL, which continues tonight, and all the great college basketball that's every day now until the first weekend in April. There'll be college basketball for you to play right there at mybookie.ag, mybookie.ag. The promo code next round, put it together, you get a deposit bonus. It's free, it's fun. The app, just go check it out right there. No app, just the website, mybookie.ag, mybookie.ag. Promo code next round. Eventually, we'll get to Alabama here in a second because I was in Baton Rouge, dominating performance, such a fun trip, my favorite trip. But one more of the playoff teams that lost this weekend, that was Georgia at Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin, finally, this is his signature win, right? This is Lane Kiffin as a coach, his signature win.
This win is reflective of all of the moves that they made in the offseason. And I go back to what Nick Saban said on his very first game day appearance in Ireland, week 0. And he said, the reason why Ole Miss couldn't beat us or Georgia isn't because they don't have skill guys. It's because they can't compete up front. All right. Well, that now with the transfer portal is fixable with the wave of a magic wand. It wasn't 5 years ago. Now it is. And I think that was proven. And one of the hottest teams, by the way, right now in the league is Ole Miss, along with Alabama. But I just thought it was, first of all, you're not just dealing with Georgia, you're dealing with conditions too. Those conditions are not conducive to the way Ole Miss wants to play football. And they handled, I can tell you from a quarterback perspective, a wet ball, wind, that plays on your psyche a little bit. Yep. And I thought Ole Miss handled that really, really well. They were the more dominant team up front. They created pressure. They affected the quarterback, which I don't think affecting the quarterback gets as much due credit as it should. Everybody wants to focus on sacks, but affecting the quarterback results in negative plays and potential turnovers as well. And that's where I thought Ole Miss really stood out.
And let me tell you about Lane Kiffin as a mature coach. He took field goals. He didn't go for it on fourth down. He played conservative. He played to his defense. I've seen him do it a couple of times against Alabama in the past when he had a fighting chance against the Tide, and he would come in. I remember the game in Tuscaloosa where the get your popcorn game, get your popcorn ready game. He goes out there in that first drive. I mean, it's fourth down tries, and he doesn't take what by the book or 3 points early in the game. He did that this week. I thought it was a sign of maturity. On the flip side, Georgia loses. And everyone seems to be blaming Carson Beck, who, pedestrian numbers, 20 of 31, 186, no touchdowns, 1 interception again. But you look at this Georgia team. ETN had 6 carries. Where are they at running back? Where are they at receiver? Where are they at tight end? Their O-line got dominated by the defensive line. Carson Beck hasn't been great, but I feel like a lot of his interceptions, Lugs, has been a product of the fact that he's having to try to do more things than he did last year or Stetson Bennett did the 2 previous years. You can't be a game manager with the weapons they have at Georgia right now, in my opinion. How do you see that Georgia roster?
Their biggest reception on the day was 29 yards to a running back named Cash Jones. They don't have any weapons. And listen, I'll tell you this. You want to talk about playoff? If you swapped that G on the helmet for the South Carolina Gamecock, would you be calling Georgia a playoff team right now?
No. They would be Missouri. They would be Missouri to me.
Absolutely, they would be. And I think I said this last week with you, Jim, is outside of the second half versus Alabama in the win versus Texas. And I'm trying to find other dominant performances by Georgia this year.
Clemson in the opener.
Clemson in the second half. Second half.
Yeah.
It was 6-0. It was 6-0 at halftime. Clemson in the second half. It's a great point. But aside from that, this is a shell of a Georgia team that we've become accustomed to seeing. And back to your point with Lane Kiffin real quick, too, when you talk about the sign of maturity, it's different to coach with the mindset when you know you have something to rely on that isn't offensive oriented, as opposed to not having that. If you're on the sideline, you're saying, hey, we can't stop these guys. All right, well, what are you going to do? You're going to be aggressive, as opposed to saying, hey, listen, we're going to get the ball back here, right? Or we're going to force a punt. And now all of a sudden it changes your mode of operation. But listen, Georgia to me, and it's not all Carson Beck, but that's the problem with the quarterback position is that's what happens. If for them and their offensive front to not be able to effectively run the football is inexcusable.
Yep.
And I to be honest with you, I think some of it might be that the people they're playing against have enough of a sample size now that are watching them and saying, we don't think their perimeter people can beat us.
That's right.
We're going to load the box. We're going to man up on the outside, and we're going to say, all right, Carson Beck, even if the guy's not open, let's see if you can complete it.
That's right. You don't have to bracket Brock Bowers anymore. You don't have that guy you got to take out of the play. But here's what's happening, because we're going to judge Georgia by what we've seen Georgia the last 3, 4, 5 years. Just like Alabama's had to be judged for 17 years, and Alabama's still being judged by the last 17 years. Yep. Georgia has played 4 top 25 teams that are in the top 25 today. 4 of those, 3 of those on the road and the other neutral site. They've won at Texas, they've lost at Alabama, they've lost at Ole Miss, and they beat Clemson neutral site. I mean, there's not a lot of people that's played that schedule, Lugs.
Nobody's played that schedule.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I think that the difference is, though, it's how they've played that schedule, right? I think when you look at them, everything just looks hard, right? And maybe it gets, I said this to you before, maybe it gets over magnetized because we've become so accustomed and conditioned to seeing them make it look easy.
That's it.
That if it was somebody else, we wouldn't have that same reaction.
That's exactly right. I mean, you look at Georgia, they're being judged just like Alabama's still being judged by the Saban years. And you don't judge other teams that way. Ohio State they get judged by their great offenses in recent years, the CJ Stroud teams and stuff. You just don't get a lot of teams that are judged by the ghost of yesteryear like Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State are judged. We'll get to Alabama next. Our friends at MyBookie, they bring you Monday Morning Live with Tom Luginbill, mybookie.ag, but also our friends at Gutter Cap. Leaves are now finally letting go, even though we were in the 80s again last week. They're trying to let go into the 60s for highs a little bit later on this week, and that's where Chris Stewart can jump in with our friends at Gutter Kappa Birmingham, 205-823-2212, 205-823-2212. You get up to 45% off the retail price because you watch this show. You get free estimates because you watch this show. So cap it, don't snap it with our friends at Gutter Kappa Birmingham. Go check them out online right there. I was down in Baton Rouge. It is my favorite road trip because you never know what you're going to see. You got great tailgating. You got craziness. You got girls and guys dressed as characters like it's Mardi Gras on steroids. It is just a crazy trip. Then you factor in a little rain, a little humidity. It was 88 degrees as we were approaching kickoff on the field down there. It was sticky. And then Alabama comes out, and all of a sudden, the first play of the game, the place is going crazy. There's a fake tiger that's there for about a minute and a half on the field, and then they roll it out and take it back to wherever it came from. And the very first play, it's a pre-snap penalty for Alabama. And if you're an Alabama fan, you're sitting there going, oh, my goodness, here's Tennessee all over again. Yeah. But then a big third down completion from Jalen Milroe. And then a few plays later, Jalen runs it, something he didn't do at Tennessee. And he goes 39 yards for a touchdown. And at that point, the noise level went softer and softer and softer until everybody was gone midway through the third quarter. It was amazing performance by Alabama, especially Jalen Milroe. I don't know if it was health or what, but when this team runs the football with Jalen Milroe, it could be the best team in the country.
Do you remember a few weeks back when we were discussing the result of the South Carolina game and that touchdown that Jalen had near the goal line where you worked to his left and then had to come back to his right? It was a foot race to get to the pylon.
Yes.
It looked like he had a piano on his back.
Yes.
Right? That wasn't Jalen Milroe on Saturday night. You're not going to convince me that guy's been healthy for the vast majority of October. The 2-week layoff got him right. You could see it. You could see it, how sudden he was, the initial quickness in the pocket, the burst in acceleration when he needed to have it on a straight line. That was different right there. And we've talked about this for several weeks. Players are not the problem at Alabama. Play is, in terms of how were they playing, right? Well, you go out, you don't turn the ball over. They are a unheard of 10 of 13 on third down, which on the road, particularly at that place, you want to quiet a crowd, stay on the field, right? And then they did have some penalties, but I didn't think it was egregious. The pre-snap, I think that's still something that they're working through. I heard somebody, we had a caller on our Sunday show with Barrett and I yesterday on Sirius XM, kind of complaining that, well, why aren't the running backs a part of the run game? All right. And my answer to that is, why do you care?
Yeah.
This is what Alabama is. Mike Leach used to say balance is full of baloney. Balance is what's working, right? This is what this iteration of Alabama's offense is at its best. If you take away negative plays, penalties, and turnovers, and you assume that they play clean, this is the 2024 best Alabama version. And Nick Sheridan and Kalen DeBoer have identified this. Would you have tried to do this with Michael Penix Jr. the last 2 years? No.
Right.
That's not what they did. All right. So I think we got to be careful to criticize the how when the results are so good. And, if you're an Alabama fan, would you like to see maybe a little bit more of Jan Miller? By the way, I loved what they did with him out of the backfield, getting some things leaked out in the passing game with him. Would you like to see more Justin Haynes or Richard Young or whatever it may be? Okay, that's fine. But the problem is you just had a team in LSU that for 2 weeks knew exactly what was going to happen and had no answer for it. None. Zero. And to me, I don't care how you're getting it done. If you play clean and that's your mode of operation, by all means, take it and run.
Sheridan, the offensive coordinator, did a terrific job, I thought, of continuing to do the traditional run plays. They had 126 traditional rush yards away from the 185 because they ended up with 311. Milroe with 185.
And 21 carries between the two backs, which is fine.
That's right.
They stuck with it.
Right. They were not the explosive 39-yard touchdown runs, but they kept there. And if you look at Jalen, some of his touchdown runs, two of them in particular that I remember, it was a fake to either Jam or Justice, and then he followed them into the hole, which was a brilliantly designed play twice. because usually you expect the fake and then the quarterback to run around the outside, the sweep.
Right.
No, he followed him right into the hole, and it froze the LSU defense both times for long touchdowns, 39 and 72 yards to bookend the blowout win for Alabama. A little bit more on this game, and the chat room blowing up with comments about what you're talking about. And I'll just paraphrase 8 of them that I've seen roll by here. It's okay to be a team that relies on quarterback runs. A lot of people are using Lamar Jackson with the Ravens. You wouldn't want him to not run the football. And then
Right.
even one Alabama fan going back and saying, who's watching us on Facebook, going back to Nick Marshall and Cam Newton. You wouldn't want those two guys to be tied to the pocket. You let them be them, and that's what you do with Milroe. You got to let Milroe be Milroe.
And you feel better about it as a coach because there's always this thing in the back of your mind. All right, man, are we overdoing it? Or can we get him injured? Like we got to temper the pitch count here. But when you're built the way that he's built, the durability factor I think kind of fades into the background with him because he's so powerful and he's built from the lower body up that maybe you don't worry about the injury as much as if it was somebody that's 6'1", 190 pounds, right? Like if it's Cade Klubnik and you're doing that all the time, that's not a good recipe for potentially keeping somebody healthy. So from that perspective, I think they've done a really good job. And going back to what you were discussing, you always hear coaches defensively talk about what a headache it is to defend a running quarterback. And what they were running is that they were running basically quarterback lead, which would be the equivalent to running ISO or lead or blast or power with a tailback and fullback. Well, now your tailback's your fullback and your quarterback's your tailback. And the coaches have to now put another person in the box to have to defend that because the quarterback's become a runner. It creates an edge and it creates an extra gap that is an advantage to the offense. It's very difficult to defend.
It was so well designed and they played so well. But so too did the defense. And I want to talk a little bit about Kane Womack's defense because I was very hard on him early on, and especially after the Vanderbilt game. But this defense.
Were you the scheme guy? Were you the leader of the scheme guy?
I was, and I apologize, Kane Womack. I was the leader of the scheme guy. I didn't like the scheme. But
I remember that discussion.
Yeah, now all of a sudden, now that the guys understand the scheme, I love the scheme. The scheme's working good. Here's the stat that blows your mind. Going into this game, with 9:44 to go in the third quarter, you know how many receptions Kyron Lacey had in that football game? The answer, 0.
0.
At 9:44 in the third quarter, he had 0 catches. Xavier Brown, Damani Jackson, put a blanket on him. And most of the time, it was one-on-one coverage from those two guys. And then the big plays the linebackers made. I thought
Campbell.
Oh yeah, the moment in the game where LSU had momentum, they stopped Alabama on 4th down. They got the ball the first play. They roll Nussmeier near side, and here's Jihad Campbell with a strip sack, and then Alabama goes on to score a touchdown, and then the game's over at that point. And then when LSU could sneak back into the game, they're at the 5-yard line again. Deontay Lawson with glue on his hands gets that interception after avoiding the pick play. Those two linebackers made 2 of the biggest plays in the football game, and that defense now has become something you can lean into if you're calling plays on the offense.
Yes, and I think, Kane Womack, what he's realized is that the young players on the back end are capable of playing on an island because they have turned into a pressure up the field, disruptive team almost entirely. And I think, you and I had a discussion about this several weeks back that they're not the same defense unless they are pressuring. And I think they figured that out. And they've got guys that can do it now up front in that front 7. And again, I think you've got to credit the maturity of the young back end. Now, Damani Jackson obviously played. He was a 5-star kid coming out of high school. He's played a lot of football. But those others back there are youngsters. And so they seem to have a lot of confidence, which allows them to say, all right, we're going to come after you here, and we feel like we can hold up on the back end, and they have. They're just somehow they've bought into the whole don't worry about how you get there, just get there, right? see ball, get ball. And they look faster than everybody else when they're playing defense.
Yeah, and that is true, and that is what a lot of people are talking about here. For the first time, they look like they were playing loose. Josh says watching the D hit guys and see their heads pop back was refreshing. They were playing loose and fast, and when you've got the athletes, that's the way to do it. Now, Romanet says, I'm ecstatic, but a little lost in this is LSU ranks 75th at stopping the run. So he's going to tap the brakes a little bit on Alabama solving all of its problems there. When you look at this Crimson Tide team and what's left, Mercer, who's a really good FCS team, but then Oklahoma on the road, 5-5 Oklahoma, and then Auburn at home. How big of a win was this for Alabama, in your opinion?
Well, I think it was a in or out playoff win. To be honest with you, I with their remaining schedule, this is the one that you had to get. Now the challenge is not playing down to the level of competition and maintaining this level of standard to finish it out and prove your worth. Like, I think every game here on out now is a prove it we're for real game after coming away with the win on the road. And listen, Alabama's won, 6 of the last 7 in Baton Rouge?
Oh,
and by the way, if you're an Alabama fan and you want to feel good about the month of November, Kalen DeBoer is 33-2 as a head coach in the month of November. He's 9-0 as a Power 4 head coach in the month of November.
Wow. November is good to him. Means he gets his
which in turn is good to the fans.
Yeah, which means he's like me. He waits until the last second to buy all of his Christmas gifts. He puts that stuff off. More from the chat room here. Bob says, I love it when coaches don't outthink themselves. Quarterback runs were gold in this game. Keep it simple, Bob is saying.
KISS method. It's kind of like when it's working, keep doing it, right? Why do we deviate? Why do we go away from something? And listen, I think it's a natural tendency. You're maybe trying to create something, do this, do that. But my goodness, if you just realize until they figure out an answer, why would you go away from success? I thought that was really nicely done by the staff in that particular game.
Zach says when the coaches use Milroe as a video game quarterback, it's a beautiful thing to watch. You didn't really address it, so I'm going to go back and say it again. When they let Milroe be Milroe, or as Emily Grace McWhorter in her reporting said, Nick Sheridan told Milroe, just be yourself. When they let Milroe be himself, Alabama can be the best team in the country. Do you think that is the case?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do I think that there are still deficiencies that can rear their ugly head in the passing game at times? Yes. I don't know if this is a team that could just line up and want to throw it 45 times a game and be uber successful doing that. Or if they had to get in that type of setting, is that what they want to be? Probably not. But I think that they've got the caliber of player, the caliber of competitive depth, and a difference maker carrying the football and touching the football on every single snap. The only thing that is preventing Alabama, in my opinion, from being a national championship contender or winner is themselves when it comes to how they play the game. It's not what they're playing it with.
Tom Luginbill of ESPN is with us. We've got another half hour to go here on Monday Morning Live. We're here every Monday. This is year 2 of this show. During football season. Tyler jumps in and says Womack was trying to protect the young DBs early and finally realized the best way to help them out is to pressure more. And he's turned up the heat, and that helps the young DBs. More of your comments in the second half hour of the show that's being brought to you by a couple of great folks. That includes our friends at roback.com. Promo code TNR20 gets you 20% off your order at roback.com. Wonderful for the man or woman on your Christmas list. Under the Tree, Roback is a great activity wear out there. Hoodies, golf wear, pants. It's the Jalen Milroe brand, by the way. Roback.com. Promo code TNR20, 20% off when you use our code right there. Also by Who Is Coffee, the coffee we drink in the morning. I've already finished my cup. I'm now to the Body Armor, but the great Next Round blend, you can jump in at the nextround.store, and go to the coffee icon, click on it, and learn more about Who Is Coffee. This is Monday Morning Live. 30 more minutes of college football talk on the other side. Stay with us.
Take the next round anywhere you go with official Next Round gear. Buy yours today at nextround.store.
Thanksgiving is here, and let the New York Butcher Shop be the place to get all of your holiday meal items. Their premium turkeys are fresh, free-range, and hormone-free. The New York Butcher Shop also has a wide selection of chef-prepared side items to help save you time in the kitchen. Pick up a bottle of wine, and your meal will be complete. Turkeys are selling fast, so place your order today. 2 locations to serve you, in Cahaba Heights and on Highway 119 in Greystone. The New York Butcher Shop. Rare quality, well-done service.
Hey, there's nothing worse than waking up to a plumbing problem. Don't get caught in a flooded house. Call the guys at Hemp Hill Services. Adam, Chad, and the team at Hemp Hill are the only ones I trust to fix it and fix it right the first time. Hemp Hill Services does it right and always at a fair price. For all of your plumbing, cooling, and heating needs, trust the name that Birmingham has trusted since 1954. That is Hemp Hill Services. Call now, 205-229-2090. That's 205-229-2090.
By now, you guys know how I feel about my fashion. However, did you know that I care about your fashion choices? Cargo shorts are out, flip-flops are only appropriate on the boat, and please throw away that stained t-shirt from college. You may be thinking, EG, that's all I own. What do I do? Here's what you do. Go to nextround.store and fill your cart with a wardrobe that is approved by me. Stock up on logo t-shirts, hoodies for football season, and hats for every day of the week. Trust me on this one and head over to nextround.store to get stocked up for this season.
Just because you've quit going to the gym, it doesn't mean that you have to quit gym altogether. Dunaway, that is. With our Next Round podcasts open 24/7, 365, you can access gym anytime you'd like. While you may have done away with your treadmill routine, our version of Dunaway is standing by ready to get you back to your absolute best. Find all that lovely Jimmy D-led content on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and in the podcast section of nextroundlive.com. This message is sponsored by Jimmy Crypto Inc. and Jimmy Crypto for President.
From the creators of The Next Round comes 2 new sites, covercrimson.com and thebarnauburn.com. 2 team sites with the same excitement and information-driven content that you get every day on The Next Round. Live daily shows, recorded shows, free of charge, plus premium content with insider information starting at just $1. And it's the perfect gift for the Alabama or Auburn fan in your family. Covercrimson.com or thebarnauburn.com. Sign up today.
Twin Peaks is the best in the game. Here, you're in the red zone for every college rivalry and divisional matchup all season long. I mean, where else are the scenic views as good as your view of the game? Only at Twin Peaks, the #1 sports bar.
Happy football season. At the Next Round, we strive to make our loyal listeners feel like they're a part of the action all season long. My name is Emily Grace McWhorter, and I do that by bringing you along for any given Saturday in Auburn or Tuscaloosa. From pregame warm-ups, touchdowns that make you feel a part of the play, and everything in between, our goal is to make you feel like you're inside Bryant-Denny or Jordan Hare. Follow along on our social media at Next Round Live on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Also, check out thebarnauburn.com and covercrimson.com while you're at it. Here's to fall Saturdays.
From the creators of The Next Round comes 2 new sites, covercrimson.com and thebarnauburn.com. 2 team sites with the same excitement and information-driven content that you get every day on The Next Round. Live daily shows, recorded shows, free of charge, plus premium content with insider information starting at just $1. And it's the perfect gift for the Alabama or Auburn fan in your family. Covercrimson.com or thebarnauburn.com. Sign up today.
Ryan Brown here for The Next Round. Join me and CBS sports analyst Brandon Marcello for the Middle 8 each Monday at 8 a.m. as we look back at the weekend of college football from the SEC to the top 25 of the college football playoff. It's the Middle 8 presented by MyBookie.ag, code Next Round.
Monday Morning Live with Tom Luginbill of ESPN. I never shout him out enough on this show, but Tyler and Forrester and sometimes Ryan Brown behind the big glass here early in the morning to make this work. Makes for a long Monday for those guys. And Taylor Korn, who handles everything social media, always here early on a Monday morning, even on a holiday. Our salute to service today. Salute to service hat on. Thank you to all the wonderful veterans in our wonderful country here, men and women and the military families who go through so much so that these men and women can protect our country and freedom around the globe. We salute you every day, and especially on this day, Veterans Day. For those that are up and moving, thanks for being with us today. The chat room is on fire. The Middle 8 is after us. As you just heard, Ryan Brown, Brandon Marcello, they follow us in a live show at 9 o'clock today with the next round. We'll talk Auburn basketball, big win at Houston with all the football. And then later on, a little NFL and college football with Brock Hewitt and LT Unlocked at 1 Central. We'll get the coaches' news conferences today with Kalen DeBoer and Hugh Freeze as Auburn's coming off the bye week there. So everything is the usual Monday for you. But again, salute to service and thank you to everyone who has served our country. Luginbill.
Hey, Jim, are we going to talk about the Auburn-Houston basketball game or the Auburn plane flight?
I think they're one and the same because they took that fight to Houston, man. What is
going on?
It was a unique story. You'll hear from the coaches coming up in the basketball part of our next round show live today. But then they went out in what was described an Elite Eight basketball game in Houston and put down a whipping. So legit basketball in our state too. But Alabama's a playoff football contender again, and they get the win at LSU. Everyone in the chat room talking about the missed open receivers by Milroe in that game. He was a little flat. He usually throws such a perfect deep ball. I don't know if it's the wet ball because it was raining situation, didn't want it to slip or whatever, but he rarely overthrows those deep passes. Ryan Williams closed the gap on one and had it in his hands, but it bobbled and went out. But he had to close the last 10 yards really quickly. That's the thing. When Milroe's running, there's at least 3 wide open, deep touchdown passes that were missed in that game. That offense can really cook. Luke's, I want to ask you now about other games in the country. First off, let's go Indiana. They are 10-0 for the first time ever, 10 wins for the first time ever, and they beat Michigan 20-15. Bye week and then Ohio State. They don't have to beat Ohio State to be a playoff team, but how would that change the discussion about Indiana if they were to beat Ohio State?
Well, it would obviously mean that you can criticize the schedule all you want, but the reality is, and I think that the committee showed this last week, that the eye test plays well for them. It's not so much who they had played up until the Michigan game. It's how they looked in doing it and how dominant they were in all 3 phases with exceptional quarterback play. Even when Curtis Rourke was out and they had to play with a freshman against Washington, they didn't skip a beat. And so I think that was rewarded by the committee. Then you go out and you beat, which a lot of people would say was the best team on the schedule to this point, even though we know what the deficiencies are for Michigan on offense. That Michigan defense is really salty. And I think we saw that by the result of the score. You beat Ohio State. You know, my worry, if you're Indiana, if that happens, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? You're because from that point on, there's nowhere to go but down. So if you were to go down, you'd want it to be in the championship game and not in the playoff, right? And so I don't know if it helps them all of that much, other than providing credibility for the legitimacy of their record. But that's probably all the credence I'd give it.
I will tell you this, that Indiana, before this last game over Michigan, was behind unbeaten Oregon, 1 loss Ohio State, 1 loss Penn State. Just in the Big Ten, they were all the way down at 8 in the college football playoff rankings. That number will go up. That the ranking will go up. It'll be interesting to see Tuesday night what the college football playoff committee does with Indiana now that they're at that magic 10-win spot. Another team that people are doubting that was in the top 12 this past week is BYU. And they sort of get bailed out if you listen to the Utah athletic director. 22-21, BYU beats Utah. It looked like they had a sack on Retzlaff, the quarterback, on the 1-yard line. They call a defensive holding, and it leads to the game-winning field goal. I've never seen an athletic director take the podium and say that before.
I haven't either. I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning watching the end of that game, and it's 4th and 10. And they call a defensive holding on the corner that's up at the top into the boundary, the short side of the field, and it's on Utah's sideline. And it's just a call you can't make. In that moment, at that time, I cannot believe that official decided to make that move at that time. But listen, the AD knew full well what he was doing. He didn't care. He would gladly write the check, which will be $40,000. I know you're not allowed to do it. I credit Kyle Whittingham because he didn't even address it in his post-game presser. He just talked about how they played. They weren't good enough and they couldn't close out the game. Class move by him. But I think this is, once again, and I understand the protection side of this when we talk about integrity of the sport, but that is the only component to sport that never has to stand on a podium and answer for anything.
Right.
Ever. And in doing so, it wouldn't change outcomes, right? But the accountability and the responsibility side, I think, would be there, no different than it is for coaches and players and administrators.
Also around the country of playoff teams, Oregon gets to that 10-win mark. They got 2 games left, games that we expect them to win. They win 39-18 over Maryland. Could Oregon lose their last 2 games and still be in the playoffs, in your opinion?
Potentially, yes. The style in which that were to happen, I think, would potentially play a role. They've been the one consistent mainstay, if you will, where you just kind of every week you see the same thing. And maybe if you didn't see the same thing, the dent would be a little bit bigger with them, maybe, and especially being late in the season. I think that's the other thing, too, is that lasting impression, if it's not too far removed, when you got to make a final decision on rankings, I don't think it helps people when you lose late.
Ohio State dominated in their win. Texas dominated Florida. Florida getting the Billy Napier coming back, or at least coaching through the end of the year, depending on how you read Scott Strickland's wording there. Penn State still there. Tennessee now gets Georgia. Looking ahead, Tennessee, Georgia this weekend. With the Volunteers, they had the easy game against Mississippi State. Now they go to Athens, and we are sitting here on a weekend where Tennessee looks like the better football team going to Athens, and if the Volunteers win, Kirby Smart and Georgia is going to miss a playoff. Did you ever think when we went to 12 teams with the way Kirby recruits that they would ever miss a 12-team playoff?
No, I really didn't, and I certainly didn't see them in a 3-loss type of scenario with their type of roster profile. But in saying that, this is the world now that we're living in. The margin of error is razor thin. It's a transactional sport now, so putting rosters together and building a cohesive roster quickly when you're exchanging 20, 30, 40, 50 guys at times, it's hard to be dominant all the time when that's the world that we're all living in. And I don't think Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or Penn State or whoever is immune to it. I think anybody's open to have somebody jump up and bite them. But, yeah, when you looked at this season going into the year, that is something that was not on anybody's bingo card.
Okay, so we'll talk the playoffs at the end and the games coming up this weekend, but no bigger for a championship pursuit than Colorado winning at Texas Tech.
Wow.
They did it in an impressive fashion. They've won 3 straight Big 12 games now. And it's not an easy ending for Coach Prime in Colorado, but they control their own destiny now. They just win 4 straight games, and they are a college football playoff team.
Yep. Unbelievable. Remarkable. Remarkable is how I would label it. Now, as much as they've improved, I think the conference is way, way down. If you looked at their last 4 games on the schedule in August, you'd have said every one of those teams was a potential Big 12 championship contender, right? And obviously we know what's happened with Utah. We know what's happened with Kansas. They just took care of Texas Tech. But you have to give them a lot of credit, and it's all right out in front of them now. And listen, it's one of those stories that was turned into this massive hype of exposure going back to the beginning of last year and their win versus TCU that seemed so improbable. Then you look at how they ended the season, how they came into the season, because they very likely could have lost to North Dakota State. You have the game at Nebraska on the road, and you're going, uh-oh. And because I really felt, I'm not kidding, Jim, I thought after the first 2 to 3 weeks, I said, if you took number 12 and number 2 off of that roster, they might be a 1-11 team. And credit to Deion Sanders and that coaching staff, because it's not just 2 and 12 anymore. They're playing well enough at the other spots to be in football games and, more importantly, win football games.
Yeah, a guy like Amari McNeil, who at the end of the game was unblockable. He was unblockable. Yeah. Any chance Texas Tech had of getting offense going, Amari McNeil was there to sack the quarterback or pressure the quarterback. That disrupted everything. So Shedeur and Travis was good again, but to your point, the other 20, fantastic for Colorado on that 41-27 road win in Lubbock. And now Colorado with Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State in a Big 12 championship game, a path to the college football playoff, which, by the way, would be just a ratings boom, right? The ratings are down a little bit on Colorado games this year as opposed to last year. But if you put Colorado in a meaningful college football playoff game to see Deion and 2 of the best players in the sport playing against a power conference team, I think the ratings would just blow up.
Well, and consider this: if they were to win the Big 12, they get a bye.
That's right. That's right. if they're higher than Boise State, it won't be guaranteed. Yeah, absolutely. One more before we talk about the next playoff selection show, which is tomorrow night. Well, actually, 2 things real quick. When we're talking about coaches exceeding expectations, hats off to Deshaun Foster at UCLA. He has won his 3rd straight game. They beat Iowa on Friday night, 20-17. He's 4-5 now. It looked like it was going to be a disaster year, but now they've got at Washington, USC in the rivalry game, and Fresno State. If he can find 2 wins in those final 3 games, he's got UCLA in a bowl game this year, which would be remarkable where they were.
No question, because they early on, the first 2 to 3, they looked lost. Like they had no plan. They weren't prepared. Completely turned around. And quarterback Ethan Garbers has played really, really well, too. He's kind of come into his stride.
Yeah, so that's UCLA. And then there's Army on this Veterans Day. They're 9-0 for the first time since they won the national championship in 1945. And in this win at North Texas, where I think a lot of people, including Lance and myself, thought they were going to lose the football game, they held Chandler Morris, who was averaging 359 yards a game passing, to just 214 yards passing, and they picked him off twice. Army did it with defense this past week.
By the way, and they did. Did you see the drive on offense that they had? 94 yards for over 13 minutes?
Yes.
Or 12 minutes, what have you. I may be wrong on that exact number. 94, and almost took an entire quarter.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
You love stats, and if you go out through recent history in college football, you find me a team, because Saban's murder ball teams would do this. With the lead at some point in the second half, they would go on an 8+ minute drive that just bled the clock and then punch it in for a touchdown. So not only did you lose half your time to make a comeback, they added 7 points to the lead there, and that's what Army did this past week. All right, mybookie.ag, and then we'll talk playoffs for our final few minutes here. Mybookie.ag, promo code next round. No space there. Put those 2 words together, and you've got an opportunity for so much fun there. If you'd like to put a little bit on the sports that are out there and take a look at some of the parlays and everything that's fun in the sports world, mybookie.ag can make it available to you. Promo code next round. Where you're watching us around the world today, mybookie.ag, mybookie.ag. Double your initial deposit by using the promo code next round at mybookie.ag. Just use that QR code on your screen as well. All right, so the committee will come out. And again, last week you had Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia who lost, Miami who lost, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama, and Boise State. Where does Alabama go? How much bump does Alabama get? Because they had prime time, they had game day, they had Fowler and Herbstreit, and they had the fact that everyone was calling this a playoff game, and they get a dominant win. So what kind of boost does Alabama get in the conversation, in your opinion?
I think it's a fairly big one. I wouldn't be surprised if it's up to 8 or 9. Because of the dominant fashion, the acknowledgement of where the game was played, although Alabama's had a ton of success there, they'll be aware of that. And again, the way it looked, the optics of it, and I don't want to overstate that, but it does play a role, man. Like when your eyes show you something and you see it, right? Believe it. I mean, that's kind of what it is. So what you saw on Saturday night, you're going to kind of sit back and go, whoa, okay, wow, right? Now, I'm also one of those people that feels like if Indiana had a brand logo on their helmet, they probably would have been in the top 4 or 5 last week when the whole thing opened. But they didn't have a preseason ranking. They're Indiana. They've had to work their way into it, and they're going to continue to have to prove that they belong. I think the win versus Michigan for Indiana is going to propel them up higher as well. And then maybe the big winner in all of this is the team that didn't play, and that's SMU.
They were just out at 13. Do you think SMU is in the 12?
It could be, maybe, and maybe they stay right where they're at. Certainly won't. I don't think they'll drop. I don't think they deserve to drop. I think the question is going to be is what do they do with Penn State and Tennessee? Who do they like better there? Because I would imagine that Texas would go to 3. And then how do they like 4, 5, and 6? I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they do there. And they may not do much there. They may feel like, hey, they've gotten it right. There's nothing to create a stir or to shook things up massively, except for the 2 teams that lost.
Blake says Alabama has to be above Georgia. Do you think Georgia is still in the 12?
That's the team that could swap places with SMU, in my opinion. Now, again, just like we talked about with Alabama and LSU, you made a great point on the schedule for Georgia. But how Georgia has played games and how they have looked is not going to help them. And it hasn't. I just don't think it will. For them to drop that far, the committee would have to really think that they are a fringe team, regardless of the players that they have. They'd have to truly believe that they're a fringe team.
Because here comes the hard part, because you're not dropping Miami all the way out, in my opinion, but you may. You may flip Miami. SMU may be in, and Miami may be down at 13.
Potentially, yeah.
I want to wait and see that. But Ole Miss was 16, right? A&M was 14, just in the same league. They didn't play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So does Ole Miss, with that win over Georgia, still with that loss of Kentucky in their trunk, do they jump into the 12, or are they still on the outside looking in? Because everyone's talking that, hey, that was Lane Kiffin's signature win. Ole Miss is now a playoff team. Well, are they? Are they going to be in the 12, you think?
They potentially could be because, and I've said this to you for years, they're peaking at the right time. They're playing their best football now when it matters the most. When the committee is scrutinizing everything. I think that matters so much right now, as it matters the comments I made about Jalen DeBoer's record in the month of November and then how Alabama all of a sudden looked on Saturday night. It matters. It plays a role. Everything that you've just brought up is what makes the scenario so muddy for the College Football Playoff Committee, because there's probably not a right or wrong answer. You could probably make a case in some way, shape, or form for every team you just brought up to be 11, 12, or 13.
Lugs, in all fairness, every time I bring up somebody, you say potentially. There's only 12 spots, and only 2 of them lost. So at some point, you got to tell me something here.
But I'm not convinced that the committee just dropped somebody because they lost.
That's right.
I understand a win's a win. I get that. And they may do that. They may say, hey, listen, they didn't play this week. Okay, well then, we like what we saw out of this team this week. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. And again, what they thought off of the first playoff release as a baseline and what they did, and then everything falls in place off of that. I would credit a win over a bye. If you were asking me, I would. That's what I would do. And but like, for example, will they do that with BYU and Utah? I don't know. Rivalry game, you're on the road, controversial end, but you win the game.
Yeah.
Right?
I wonder how
they're going to reward that.
I wonder how the committee looks at controversial endings, like Miami, Virginia Tech, however you saw that ending.
Miami, Cal.
Yeah, Miami, Cal. I mean, I think there are some of the committee members, at least I would be, I'd be like, okay, I can't count that as a loss, but I know what happened in that game, and now they've lost the game. I want to give you a chance to react because you do a lot of the ACC Network Prime. You do the ACC Network Prime time. I find it hard to believe Georgia is going to be out of the 12. I also find it hard to believe that Ole Miss isn't going to be ahead of Georgia. Alabama's got to be ahead of Georgia. We got about 60.
You're talking about this week, you're saying?
This week in the rankings.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's an automatic bid for the ACC championship winner, and I've only got 60 seconds for this answer.
Okay.
Is there a potential chance that Miami and SMU both are out of the top 12? Georgia and Ole Miss both hang in there, and then the bracket is unveiled that the ACC champion gets a bye, but they're not one of the top 12 ranked teams. Is that potential?
Yes, there's absolutely potential for that. I don't think there's any question about it.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Georgia. I think Georgia is a bit of a question mark in that scenario with where they are right now. If Georgia were to go down to Tennessee, it's over, right? We talked about that already. But yes, I think that's a possibility for the ACC. They are on thin ice right now.
Yeah. Well, get your graphic ready if that happens. For Saturday night's primetime broadcast. You guys will have a lot to talk about, and we'll need you to defend the ACC like Klatt defends the Big Ten all the time on his broadcast. He's Tom Luginbill. He's ESPN. What a weekend of college football. We continue the conversation with the Middle Eight, brought to you by MyBookie.ag. Brandon Marcello and Brown standing by. See you then in just a second.